The man knew he was going to die. Not someday, not eventually. Soon. Perhaps today. For 4 years, he had lived inside the most violent criminal organization on Earth, the Cartel Jalisco New Generation, known as CJNG. He had risen through the ranks, earned trust, attended meetings where executions were ordered and territories were divided. And every night, he had transmitted intelligence to his FBI handlers. He was the most valuable informant in DEA and FBI history. A man so deep inside CJNG that he had personally met with Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, the most wanted drug trafficker in the world. The $10 million bounty on El Mencho's head had been uncollectible for over a decade. Mexican and American authorities had tried everything: surveillance operations, military raids, coordinated strikes. Every attempt had failed. El Mencho always knew they were coming. Until now, the informant had provided what no satellite, no wiretap, no intelligence agency had been able to obtain: El Mencho's exact location, his security protocols, his escape routes, and, most critically, the schedule that would put him in one place long enough for an operation to succeed. The raid was planned for 72 hours away. This is the story of the most dangerous undercover operation in FBI history, and how one man's courage helped bring down the leader of an organization responsible for more American deaths than any terrorist group. The informant's recruitment began with a prison cell. In 2019, a mid-level CJNG operative was arrested in San Diego on drug trafficking charges. He faced 40 years in federal prison. His family in Mexico had already been threatened by rivals who saw his arrest as an opportunity. He had nothing to lose. FBI agents approached him with a proposition: cooperate. Not just by providing information, but by going back. Return to Mexico. Resume his position in the cartel. And report everything. The risks were explained clearly. If CJNG discovered his cooperation, his death would be prolonged and horrific. The cartel was known for torture sessions lasting days. They would kill his family first, making him watch. Then they would kill him in ways designed to send messages to anyone else who might consider betrayal. He agreed anyway. His charges were quietly reduced. His release was staged to appear like a legal technicality. He returned to Mexico with a cover story about corrupt lawyers and bribed judges. CJNG welcomed him back. The first year was the most dangerous. The informant had to reestablish trust while avoiding any behavior that might trigger suspicion. CJNG maintained extensive counterintelligence operations. They monitored communications. They tested loyalty through provocations. They executed suspected informants regularly. He watched 3 men die during his first 6 months, all suspected of cooperation with authorities. One had been innocent, killed over a misunderstood phone call. The other 2 had actually been informants for Mexican agencies. He understood the stakes. His communication with FBI handlers was minimal and carefully structured. He never used phones or electronic devices. Instead, he passed information through a network of cutouts, individuals who didn't know they were part of an intelligence operation. Messages were hidden in commercial shipments. Coded signals were embedded in routine business transactions. The information flow was slow but secure. Every piece of intelligence was worth the wait. The informant's rise within CJNG accelerated faster than anyone expected. His criminal skills were genuine. He had been a successful trafficker before his arrest. But his value to the organization came from something else: reliability in an environment of constant betrayal. CJNG was at war on multiple fronts. Rival cartels contested their territories. Mexican military operations disrupted their supply chains. Internal power struggles created factions that threatened organizational cohesion. In this chaos, the informant became known as someone who could be trusted to execute tasks without complications. He moved shipments successfully. He managed distribution networks efficiently. He never skimmed money or product. His reputation reached the upper levels of the organization. By his second year, he was attending meetings with CJNG's regional commanders. By his third year, he had met El Mencho himself. The first meeting with El Mencho occurred at a ranch in the mountains of Jalisco. The informant had been summoned without explanation. He assumed he was being tested, or possibly executed. CJNG leadership sometimes called meetings specifically to eliminate suspects, using the gathering as an opportunity for controlled killings. He prepared a final message for his FBI handlers to be transmitted if he failed to check in within 48 hours. But the meeting wasn't an execution. El Mencho wanted to discuss expansion into new territories. The informant's successful management of existing operations had attracted attention. The cartel's leader wanted his input on logistics, routes, and personnel. The informant spent 4 hours with the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere. He memorized every detail: the layout of the ranch, the number of guards, the vehicles present, the communication equipment visible, El Mencho's health, demeanor, and physical condition. The intelligence he transmitted after that meeting fundamentally changed American understanding of CJNG's leadership structure. The relationship with El Mencho deepened over the following year. The informant was brought into more sensitive operations. He attended planning sessions for major trafficking initiatives. He witnessed discussions of corruption, which Mexican officials were on CJNG's payroll, which American border agents had been recruited. He learned about CJNG's violence operations, the assassination teams, the torture protocols, the mass graves where enemies were disposed, the terror campaigns designed to intimidate communities into compliance. He reported everything. Each piece of intelligence was carefully evaluated by FBI analysts. Some led to immediate action: arrests of American citizens working for the cartel, seizures of drug shipments, disruption of financial networks. Other intelligence was held too valuable to act on without risking the source. The informant was protecting more than drug investigations. He was providing strategic insight into an organization that threatened Mexican stability, American communities, and regional security. The intelligence about El Mencho's personal security was particularly valuable. CJNG's leader maintained elaborate protection protocols. He never slept in the same location twice. He traveled in convoys of armored vehicles with decoy configurations. He changed phones daily and communicated through couriers rather than electronic channels. His paranoia was justified. The Mexican government had launched multiple operations to capture him. The American government had offered $10 million for information leading to his arrest. He was the most hunted criminal in the Western Hemisphere. But the informant was inside the security apparatus. He learned the pattern recognition systems that El Mencho's guards used to identify threats. He documented the safe house rotation, which properties were used, how often they changed, what signals indicated planned movements. He mapped the escape routes, tunnels, hidden vehicles, extraction protocols that would be activated if a raid occurred. He identified the vulnerabilities. El Mencho's security was sophisticated but not perfect. There were windows, moments when the protection was reduced, locations where escape routes could be blocked. circumstances when the normally cautious leader let his guard down. The FBI began planning. The operational concept evolved over 18 months. A direct American operation was impossible. Mexican sovereignty prohibited U.S. military or law enforcement action on Mexican soil without government cooperation. And Mexican institutions were heavily compromised by cartel corruption. But cooperation was possible through careful channel selection. The FBI identified Mexican counterparts who were believed to be clean. Officers in the Mexican Marines and Attorney General's office who had resisted cartel recruitment. These individuals were cultivated through a separate relationship-building effort. Eventually, a joint operational framework emerged. American intelligence would provide targeting information. Mexican forces would execute the operation. The informant would provide real-time updates that ensured the operation succeeded. The plan required everything to align perfectly. And then, in late 2024, the opportunity appeared. Mencho's health had been declining. The informant reported that CJNG's leader was suffering from a kidney condition that required regular medical treatment. For years, he had managed the condition through mobile medical teams that came to him, but the condition had worsened. He needed equipment that couldn't be moved. He needed specialists who couldn't be brought to remote mountain ranches. For the first time in years, Mencho would have to stay in one location for an extended period. The treatment was scheduled for a compound in Jalisco. The compound was remote but accessible. The treatment required 72 hours, 3 days when Mencho's movement would be restricted by medical necessity. The informant transmitted the location, the timeline, and detailed information about security arrangements. The window was opening. The FBI coordinated with Mexican partners in absolute secrecy. The circle of knowledge was restricted to fewer than a dozen people on each side. Communications used channels that bypassed normal institutional structures. Planning meetings occurred in person with no electronic records. The operational plan was straightforward in concept but complex in execution. Mexican Marines would assault the compound in overwhelming force. Multiple helicopter teams would insert simultaneously to prevent escape. Blocking forces would secure the road networks and monitor the known tunnel exits. The informant would provide real-time intelligence during the operation, confirming Mencho's presence and alerting operators to any changes in security posture. American intelligence assets would provide overhead surveillance and communication support from across the border. The raid was scheduled for 72 hours after Mencho arrived at the compound. The informant faced an impossible final challenge. To provide real-time intelligence during the operation, he would need to be at or near the compound when the raid occurred. His communications would need to be continuous, not the delayed dead drops he had used for 4 years. If the raid succeeded, his role might be concealed in the chaos. But if anything went wrong, if Mencho escaped, if the operation was compromised, if the assault failed, the informant would be immediately suspected. He would die badly. His handlers offered extraction. They could pull him out before the operation, preserving his safety while Mexican forces acted on the intelligence he had already provided. He refused. Too much could go wrong without real-time guidance. Mencho might change locations. Security might be reinforced. Escape routes might be modified. The operation needed him inside until the last moment. He understood he was probably making a one-way choice. He made it anyway. The night before the operation, the informant transmitted final confirmation. Mencho was at the compound. Medical treatment had begun. Security was heavy but configured for the expected 3-day stay. The tunnel exits were manned, but not by the full security complement. The operation was go. Mexican Marine helicopters lifted off from a staging base at 3 a.m. American surveillance aircraft positioned along the border provided real-time imagery. FBI personnel monitored communications from a joint operations center in San Diego. The informant moved to a position where he could observe the compound while remaining outside the immediate security perimeter. His communications device, hidden in a commercial product that appeared entirely ordinary, transmitted his observations continuously. He watched the helicopters approach. The assault was overwhelming. 4 helicopters inserted Marine Special Operations teams simultaneously at different points around the compound. Blocking forces sealed the roads. Overhead surveillance tracked all movement in the area. Security forces at the compound responded immediately. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions. The defenders were well armed and prepared for confrontation, but they were outnumbered and outpositioned. The firefight lasted 47 minutes. CJNG security forces fought fiercely, but the Marines' tactical advantages were decisive. Helicopter gunships suppressed defensive positions. Ground teams advanced systematically through the compound. The informant provided continuous intelligence throughout. He identified the building where El Mencho was located. He reported when security forces attempted to activate an escape tunnel. He warned when reinforcements from a nearby position began moving toward the compound. His real-time guidance allowed the Marines to adapt and overcome each defensive response. El Mencho was killed attempting to reach an escape tunnel. The specifics of his death were not immediately released. Mexican authorities confirmed only that he had been killed during the operation, along with 11 members of his security detail, the most wanted drug trafficker in the world. The leader of an organization responsible for flooding American communities with fentanyl, for thousands of murders, for destabilizing entire regions of Mexico, was dead. The $10 million bounty would never be paid. Justice had been delivered another way. The informant's extraction occurred within hours of the operation's conclusion. As chaos enveloped CJNG following El Mencho's death, a pre-positioned team moved the informant to a secure location. From there, he was transported across the border through channels that bypassed normal crossing procedures. Within 24 hours of the raid, he was in FBI custody in the United States. His identity would never be revealed. His role in the operation would never be publicly acknowledged. He would spend the rest of his life under a new name, in a new location, with constant protective surveillance. It was a small price for the intelligence he had provided. The aftermath of El Mencho's death reshaped the criminal landscape of the Western Hemisphere. CJNG fractured immediately. The organization had been held together by El Mencho's personal authority, his relationships with regional commanders, his reputation for both success and savage enforcement. Without him, the center could not hold. Within weeks, formerly unified CJNG territory was contested by internal factions. Commanders who had been allies became rivals. The organizational discipline that had made CJNG uniquely dangerous dissolved into chaos. Rival cartels seized the opportunity. Territories changed hands. Violence increased as the power vacuum created opportunities for expansion. But the violence was the violence of weakness, not strength. CJNG's ability to project power, to threaten Mexican institutions, to flood American communities with drugs, all were degraded by the loss of its founder. The intelligence the informant had provided continued to generate results long after El Mencho's death. His 4 years inside CJNG had produced a comprehensive understanding of the organization's structure, names, relationships, financial networks, corruption relationships, operational methods. FBI and DEA used this intelligence for dozens of subsequent operations, arrests of American citizens who had worked with CJNG, seizures of assets that had been hidden through complex financial structures, disruption of trafficking routes that the informant had helped document. The informant's work wasn't finished when he extracted. It continued through the intelligence he had gathered over 4 years of impossible courage. The fentanyl crisis continued, but the largest supplier network was crippled. CJNG had been the dominant force in fentanyl trafficking to the United States. Their supply chains, manufacturing capabilities, and distribution networks had made them responsible for a significant portion of the synthetic opioid deaths devastating American communities. Mencho's death didn't end the fentanyl crisis. Other organizations adapted to fill the gap. The demand that drove the market remained, but the disruption was measurable. In the months following the operation, fentanyl seizures showed changed trafficking patterns. Prices increased in some markets as supply chains adjusted. The efficiency that CJNG had brought to drug trafficking was lost, at least temporarily. Lives were saved. How many was impossible to calculate, but the mathematics were simple. Disrupted supply meant fewer drugs reaching American users. Fewer drugs meant fewer overdoses. Fewer overdoses meant survivors who would have been casualties. The informant had saved lives he would never know about. The FBI's institutional learning from the operation was significant. The success demonstrated that long-term human intelligence operations against major criminal organizations were possible. Even organizations as violent and security-conscious as CJNG. The risks were extreme. The operational requirements were demanding. The personal courage required was exceptional, but the results were transformative in ways that no other intelligence method could achieve. Satellites couldn't attend meetings with cartel leaders. Wiretaps couldn't observe body language and assess relationships. Technical intelligence couldn't provide the strategic understanding that came from years of patient observation by a skilled human source. The FBI's approach to transnational criminal organizations evolved based on the operation's lessons. The informant's identity remains classified. Somewhere in America, he lives under a name that isn't his own. His neighbors don't know that the quiet man on their street spent 4 years inside the world's most dangerous criminal organization. His new friends don't know that his courage helped kill one of the most wanted men in the world. He can never go back to Mexico. He can never contact anyone from his previous life. He can never speak publicly about what he did. He is a hero who must remain anonymous. The FBI personnel who handled his case understand what he sacrificed. The 4 years of constant fear, the isolation from family and friends, the certain knowledge that discovery meant death. He did it anyway, not for money. The payments he received were modest compared to what he could have earned remaining in the cartel. Not for revenge. He had no personal grievance against Mencho. He did it because someone had to. Because the drugs that CJNG trafficked were killing Americans by the tens of thousands. Because the violence they inflicted was destroying Mexican communities. Because the criminal organization they had built was a threat to everything decent. Someone had to stop them. He volunteered to be that someone. The threat from Mexican cartels continues. CJNG's fracturing created opportunities for other organizations. New leaders emerged. New alliances formed. The criminal ecosystem adapted, as it always does. The demand for drugs remains. The profits remain. The incentives for violence and corruption remain. The next cartel leader is already building power. The next trafficking network is already establishing roots. The next threat to American communities is already emerging, and somewhere, an FBI handler is cultivating the next source, building the relationship that might lead to the next impossible infiltration, preparing for the next operation that could only succeed through human courage. That's where the next investigation begins. That's how the next threat will be neutralized. The informant's name will never be known, but his impact will be measured in the lives saved by CJNG's disruption, in the communities spared from the full weight of fentanyl trafficking, in the Mexican families who no longer live under the shadow of the organization's violence. He gave 4 years of his life, accepting the constant possibility of death to achieve something that mattered. That's what courage looks like. That's what sacrifice means. And that's what made the difference when it counted most. This is what the FBI does every day, whether you know it or not.